Attention. Lockdown. Lockdown. Lock the doors. Stay away from the windows.
I was in the school bathroom when everything started. It was just after lunch, and I had texted my friend Sam to come hang out with me. We were both bored, didn't want to go back to class, and the bathroom seemed like a good place to just chill for a bit without anyone bothering us. It wasn't the cleanest spot, but no one would find us there. Sam came in a few minutes later, and we were laughing quietly about some dumb joke when all of a sudden, the loudspeaker crackled on.
Lockdown, lockdown, this is not a drill. Teachers, lock your doors immediately.
The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Lockdown. Sam and I froze, staring at each other wide-eyed. I had never been in a real lockdown before. We always had drills, but they never felt real. This was real. "What do we do?" Sam whispered, his voice shaky. I looked around, trying to think. We need to hide. They always say to stay quiet and out of sight. Quickly, I reached for the light switch and turned it off. The bathroom plunged into darkness. We moved quietly into one of the stalls at the far end. My heart was pounding so hard that it hurt. Sam squeezed in beside me, and we both crouched down, making sure our feet couldn't be seen under the door. I could hear his breathing, fast and panicked, and I realized mine wasn't much better. What if they come in here?" Sam asked, barely above a whisper. "We just have to stay quiet," I said, trying to keep calm, though my hands were shaking. "Maybe they won't even check in here. It's too dark." We sat there in the pitch-black stall, listening. The school had gone silent. No voices, no footsteps, no nothing. The silence was somehow worse than noise. Every second that passed felt like an hour. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, thudding like a drum. Minutes went by. Then, far off in the distance, I heard a faint noise. It sounded like someone shouting, but I couldn't make out the words. Sam tensed beside me, and I could feel his fear. I was scared too, but I couldn't let it take over. Not now. We just had to wait it out. Suddenly, there were footsteps in the hallway, heavy and slow. The sound sent a chill down my spine. They were getting closer. Whoever it was, they were walking with purpose, like they knew exactly where they were going. My breath caught in my throat. Sam squeezed my arm so hard it hurt, but I didn't make a sound. The footsteps stopped outside the bathroom door. I didn't dare move. The door creaked as it was pushed open. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might burst out of my chest. Someone stepped into the bathroom, and I could hear them breathing, heavy, uneven breaths, like they were angry or scared. I squeezed my eyes shut. Whoever it was, they were inside now. They were in the same room as us. The person moved slowly, their footsteps echoing in the quiet bathroom. I could hear them moving between the stalls, checking each one. My whole body tensed up. I could feel Sam trembling next to me. The person opened the first stall with a loud bang, the door hitting the wall. Then they moved to the next one. Bang! Another door flew open. They were getting closer. The third stall was checked, then the fourth. My mind was racing, trying to think of what to do if they opened ours. I couldn't run. There was no way out. I had no idea if they had a weapon, but I wasn't about to find out. I just had to hope the lock would hold, and they'd leave. The footsteps stopped right in front of our stall. I held my breath. The handle rattled as the person tried to open it. The door stayed locked, but I could hear them trying to push it open, testing if anyone was inside. For what felt like forever, they just stood there. I could hear them breathing, muttering something under their breath that I couldn't make out. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they'd hear it. Then something strange happened. The person stopped trying to open the door. They stood there, silent, like they were thinking. It was so dark that they probably couldn't see us. Maybe they didn't know anyone was hiding here. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the person turned and walked away. I heard their footsteps retreat, and the bathroom door clicked shut behind them. I let out a long, shaky breath. Sam did the same. We sat there in stunned silence for what felt like hours, too scared to move or even speak. The darkness pressed in on us, and all I could think about was how close we had come to being caught. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the loudspeaker crackled again. The lockdown is over. The building is secure. Teachers, please resume your classes. Sam and I sat there, still too shocked to move. Eventually, we stood up, our legs shaky and sore from crouching for so long. We slowly unlocked the stall and stepped out into the bathroom. It looked the same as it did before, but everything felt different. We had just been inches away from something terrible, and we were lucky to have made it out. As we walked back into the hallway, I couldn't stop thinking about the person who had almost opened our stall. If they had tried just a little harder, if they had pushed a little more, we would have been found. And who knows what would have happened then? Sam was quiet, too. Neither of us said a word as we walked back to class. The school felt different now, like it wasn't as safe as I had always thought. Lockdown drills would never feel the same again. Then, about a week later, we got an update. It was all over the news, and even the teachers were talking about it. The guy who had caused the lockdown wasn't just some random shooter. He had escaped from a mental hospital. My stomach dropped when I heard that. The story was even worse than I imagined. This guy had a long history of violence. He was known for being obsessed with kids, and there were reports that he had kidnapped and killed children in the past. That's why he was in a mental hospital in the first place. He had been deemed too dangerous to be free. But somehow he had managed to escape and was now out in the world, possibly looking for his next target. I could feel panic rising in my throat as I thought about how close we had come to encountering him. I replayed that day in my mind over and over again. If Sam and I hadn't turned off the lights, if it hadn't been so dark, I shuddered to think of what might have happened. We could have been right there in front of him, exposed and terrified. It was a regular school day at Westwood High, and I had just wrapped up my 4th period class. The students filed out one by one, chatting and laughing, heading to their next classes. I had a bit of a break now, as 5th period was my planning time. Usually I'd take these moments to catch up on grading or prepare for the next day's lessons, but today I had a meeting scheduled in the principal's office to go over some administrative matters. There wasn't any upcoming school event, but I wanted to make sure everything was in order for the week ahead. I grabbed my binder, locked my classroom door, and started walking toward the office. The hallways were still bustling with students heading to their next class, but it wasn't as crowded as it usually was during class changes. It was that in-between time when most students were already where they needed to be, leaving the hallways to the stragglers. As I reached the principal's office, I could see Mr. Dawson, our principal, already sitting at his desk, flipping through some papers. Maria, another teacher, was there too, along with Miss Hill. I greeted them with a smile and sat down at the table, ready to go over the agenda for the meeting. Just as we were about to start, there was a knock on the front door of the school. It was strange because the front doors were usually locked at this time of day, and visitors had to be buzzed in. Mr. Dawson looked up surprised and gestured toward the door. "Miss Parker, could you see who that is?" I nodded and stood up, walking over to the door. As I approached, I saw a man standing outside. He was probably in his late 40s, wearing a brown jacket and holding a small briefcase. His face was calm, with a slight smile that made him seem friendly, though something about him didn't sit right with me. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I pushed the thought aside. I opened the door just a crack, enough to speak through, but not enough for him to step inside. "Hello, can I help you?" The man smiled wider. "Hi, I'm one of the counselors for today's event. I'm just here to assist with the preparations." I blinked, confused. "Event? There's no event scheduled for today." He chuckled lightly, shaking his head. "Oh, it's a last-minute thing. I guess they didn't have time to notify everyone. I was just told to come in and help with setup." Something didn't feel right. "Do you have your badge with you?" The man hesitated for just a second, his smile faltering. I must have left it in the car. I didn't think I'd need it. A little voice in the back of my head told me to be cautious, but I ignored it. He seemed normal enough, and his excuse, while odd, didn't seem like a huge red flag. I sighed, opening the door wider. All right, come on in. He nodded his thanks and walked past me into the school. I watched him for a moment as he walked down the hall, his footsteps fading as he disappeared from view around the corner. I shrugged, closed the door, and went back to the meeting. We hadn't even begun when Mr. Dawson's phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up and stared at the screen for a moment, his face going pale. Then he looked up at us, his voice shaky. We're going into lockdown. My heart sank. Lockdown? Why? Mr. Dawson didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed the intercom. Attention staff and students, lockdown, lockdown. This is not a drill. Please secure all doors and hide immediately. Panic shot through me. My first thought was about the man I had just let inside the building. What if he wasn't who he said he was? What if he was dangerous? My stomach churned as I realized I might have made a terrible mistake. Maria looked at me with wide eyes. What's going on? Why are we in lockdown? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I think it might be that guy I let in. He said he was a counselor, but something felt off. Her eyes widened even more, and fear flashed across her face. What do you mean? Who was he? I don't know, I whispered, my voice shaking. I didn't get his badge. I let him in anyway. Before anyone could say anything more, we heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, slow footsteps, like someone was deliberately walking through the building, searching for something or someone. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the fear rising in the room as we all realized the danger we were in. The footsteps stopped outside the door to the office. There was a brief moment of silence and then a loud bang as the person slammed their hand against the door. We all jumped in our seats, fear paralyzing us. Then we heard his voice, low, angry, and filled with venom. Maria, I know you're in there. Open the door. Maria's face turned ashen. Oh my God, she whispered, her voice barely audible. It's him. My blood ran cold. Him? Who? The man he's my ex-husband. I owe him money. He's been threatening me for weeks, she stammered, her voice trembling with terror. I didn't think he'd come here. Oh my God, what have I done? The banging on the door grew more violent. Maria, open the door and give me my money. I could see the panic in Maria's eyes as she backed away from the door, her hands shaking uncontrollably. We were trapped. There was no way out, and the man outside knew exactly who was in the room. He pounded on the door again, harder this time, and I could hear the doorknob rattling as he tried to force it open. For what felt like an eternity, the banging continued. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the noise. We all held our breath, waiting to see what would happen next. After a few minutes, the footsteps retreated down the hallway, and we let out a collective sigh of relief. He hadn't gotten in. We were safe for now, but the fear still lingered in the room. Maria was shaking, tears streaming down her face. I didn't think he'd come here. I thought I was safe. The lockdown lasted another 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. Finally, Mr. Dawson received word that the lockdown was over. The man had left the building, and the police were on their way to investigate. 2 days later, we got the full story. The man I had let in wasn't a counselor at all. He was Maria's ex-husband, a man with a violent past, who had been stalking her for weeks, demanding money she had taken during their divorce. He had threatened her before, but she had never thought he would show up at the school. To this day, the guilt of letting him inside haunts me. I made a mistake, a dangerous one, and it nearly cost us everything. If he had gotten into that room, I don't even want to imagine what could have happened. Even now, every time I think back to that day, I feel a chill run down my spine. We were lucky, but I'll never forget how close we came to disaster. It was the fall of 2016, and the clown pandemic was all anyone could talk about. News reports flooded in from different parts of the country. People dressed in creepy clown costumes, scaring, and even kidnapping children. In our 17th grade class at middle school, it was the main topic of conversation. Everyone was on edge, even though no one really believed it would happen in our town. Then one day, the principal made an announcement over the intercom. A threatening message had been posted on Snapchat the night before, and it was targeting our school specifically. I'll never forget the words, "I will kidnap from this school today," the message said, accompanied by a picture of a clown with a big, creepy smile. The clown's eyes were blank, staring straight through the screen, and it felt like it was watching us. Some of the teachers were visibly worried, but when the principal came back on the speaker, he sounded completely unfazed. "There is no credible danger," he said calmly. "This is just a prank. Please continue with your day as normal." Most of the kids weren't so sure. You could hear whispers throughout the hallways. Some kids laughed it off, while others were clearly nervous. I was somewhere in the middle, trying to play it cool but feeling a knot form in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The day continued as usual. We had math, science, and lunch, and nothing out of the ordinary happened. But the message still hung over us, like a dark cloud we couldn't see, but knew was there. After lunch, I had to use the restroom. The bathrooms were on the far side of the school, which meant I had to walk down one of the longest, creepiest hallways. It was quiet, and the lights always flickered, giving the entire stretch a weird, eerie feeling. I hated it, but I figured I'd just get it over with and hurry back to class. I had just finished washing my hands when the worst possible thing happened. The school lockdown alarm blared through the building and my heart sank. This wasn't a drill. "This is a lockdown. This is not a drill." The voice on the intercom was panicked, nothing like the principal's usual calm tone. "Everyone, please follow lockdown procedures immediately." My hands froze under the water. A lockdown, right now. Was this really happening? The message from earlier flashed through my mind, and suddenly, everything felt very real. My teacher had always told us to hide if we were in the hallway during a lockdown. I knew I had to get out of the open. I burst out of the bathroom and into the hallway. It was dead silent. No teachers, no students. Just the flickering lights and an overwhelming sense of dread. I had to find somewhere to hide, fast. Then I spotted the lockers along the wall. I ran to the nearest row of lockers, praying that one of them was open. Most of the lockers were old and didn't lock properly, but a few had automatic locks that would close if no one was inside when the door shut. I found one with the door slightly ajar, squeezed myself inside, and pulled the door closed behind me. The locker was tight, and it smelled musty. My breathing was heavy, and I tried to quiet it, but the harder I tried, the more scared I became. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel sweat trickling down my face. This couldn't be happening. Then I heard footsteps. They were slow and heavy, echoing through the empty hallway. The sound made my skin crawl. I held my breath, hoping that whoever or whatever was out there would pass by without noticing me. But the footsteps kept getting closer, and then I heard something that made my blood run cold. A laugh. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was high-pitched and twisted, like something straight out of a nightmare. My heart pounded even faster, and I pressed myself further into the back of the locker as if I could disappear into the metal. The footsteps stopped right in front of the lockers. For a moment, everything was silent. Then I heard a voice, low and raspy with a strange, inhuman cheerfulness. "Hey, I think there's a kid in these lockers," one of the clowns said. My heart nearly stopped. They knew. They knew someone was hiding. Another voice, even more sinister, joined in. "Yeah, there's probably one hiding. Let's check." They began rattling the locker doors, pulling on the handles one by one. The noise was deafening in the quiet hallway. My hands started shaking as I clamped them over my mouth, trying desperately not to make a sound. Then one of them grabbed the handle of my locker. The door rattled, but it didn't open. The automatic lock had engaged. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't keep trying. The clown yanked the handle again, harder this time. I could hear him grunting in frustration. "It's locked," he muttered. There was a pause, and then the second clown spoke, his voice full of eerie amusement. "There's a kid in there, though. I can feel it." "Yeah, but the lock's engaged," the first clown replied. "Can't open it if it's locked. Lucky kid." They both chuckled, their laughs echoing in the hallway. It was the most twisted sound I had ever heard. I felt tears well up in my eyes, but I forced myself to stay silent. My whole body was shaking uncontrollably. I thought at any moment they might break the lock or decide to wait outside just to see if I came out. After what felt like an eternity, their footsteps started again, slowly fading down the hallway. I stayed frozen in the locker, unable to move, even after I could no longer hear them. My heart was pounding so loudly that I thought it would give me away, even though the clowns were gone. Minutes passed, maybe even hours. I wasn't sure. All I knew was that I couldn't move. Finally, the intercom crackled back to life. "Lockdown over," the voice said, still shaky. "Students and staff, you may return to your classrooms. Everyone is safe." I pushed open the locker door and stumbled out, my legs feeling like jelly. I was sweating and my hands were shaking as I wiped my face. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I had been so close to being found, and I was only saved because the locker had an automatic lock. If it hadn't, I didn't want to think about what might have happened. 1 week later, I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. A week later, the clowns returned, but this time, they weren't just here to scare us. They were armed. 3 clowns stormed the school that morning with guns, and everything descended into chaos. I was in class when the shooting started. We heard the gunshots echoing down the hallway, followed by screams. 2 people were shot, both near the cafeteria, but they survived. The entire school went into lockdown again. We huddled under our desks, terrified, listening to the clowns' footsteps and the echo of gunfire. The police arrived quickly, but the clowns disappeared before they could be caught. No one knew how they had gotten in or how they had escaped so easily. They left behind a trail of panic, but somehow we were all physically unharmed. Emotionally, though, we were wrecked. The principal was under fire after that. Parents were furious, teachers were demanding answers, and everyone wanted to know why more hadn't been done after the first threat. If there had been automatic locks on all the classroom doors, one of the teachers shouted at a meeting, "This wouldn't have happened. You should have taken that first threat seriously." The principal, looking down at his hands, muttered, "How was I supposed to know? Are you stupid?" I couldn't have known. But deep down, I knew. If it hadn't been for the automatic lock on that locker, I don't know what would have happened to me that day. And the thought still haunts me to this day.